that you do stuff and turn them on again. Do you like them on?
As for me, I would like
On? Hands up with lights on.
Как хотите, свет чтобы горел или нет?
Lights on or off? On, clear,
Половина
on.
света.
Off.
Половина
Кто
света.
хочет, чтобы выключить свет? Или включить? Как лучше?
Смотря что мы будем делать.
Okay.
Смотря что мы будем делать.
О, а половину можно.
Половину, если.
Before
Там
we go
один
any further,
выключатель.
you should each have two
Слушай, они так не
handouts.
продумали.
One is my slides, okay, and
Посмотрим
one
на
is
устройство
a
моего
pack
отеля,
of
вы не поняли, что
written
для них
stuff.
в
It
этом
starts
уже
with
большой
module
прогресс.
specification. So you should each have one of those. Has everybody got one? Great, super, it worked.
Это на бурную страницу.
Okay, so I've got about an hour and a half with you this morning, and I thought we don't want to just sit there and listen to me. Okay, so I am going to start by setting the context of what we're going to do. And then I've got an activity for you, and that's why you're in these groups. We're going to then have a bit of a class discussion about your findings. And then I'm going to finish with a few what I call takeaways, things, messages. And I think you will come up with messages, but I've also got one or two. The activity is, having heard a bit about module specification, a programme at De Montfort University is made up of several modules or units. When we've heard a little bit about module specifications and why they're designed the way they are, you're then going to look at a few samples and criticise them, or say what you like about them as well. And then we'll have a discussion about those module specifications. That's what we're going to do. Happy, everybody? It would be great, by the way, if at each table there is somebody whose English is pretty good. Okay? Because when we come to the plenary session, the person whose English is good can translate between the others that are not so good. Okay? By the way, my Russian is dreadful.
But you have it.
Okay? You have a really good head start on me. So when I come round and you're talking in your language, I won't be able to understand a thing. I am sorry. If you speak in French, I can understand French. Speaking a bit of German, I might be able to understand a bit of German, but I'm afraid I do not understand Russian. Or Belarusian version of Russian. Right, okay. So what I want to start off with is a bit of context that gives you something about why we specify modules the way we do. And therefore why we specify our programs the way we do. I know from Richard Gatwood, I think some of you have met Richard in the past, that he has done some things on this before with some of you. So for some of you, you may already know this, others, perhaps not so. So that's why I am going to cover it again a little bit, okay? I don't want to spend longer than 20, 30 minutes on this first part, so you can get doing things. So to set the context, in this country, in the UK, we have something called the Framework for Higher Education Qualifications. We all know it by FHEQ. So we talk about FHEQ. And this is basically a set of statements that give us our standards. of our programs. It was created about 15, 20 years ago now, started up, by a series of well-respected academics across the UK getting together and establishing what they thought a BSc honours, a degree programme with honours in this country should be. What standards we should expect. What we should expect also from a master's student. What we should expect from a foundation degree, which is lower than a degree. What we should expect from a cert, certificate of higher education, which is even lower down. But there are a series of statements, we call them descriptors, that specify for each level, starting at level 4, which is the first year of undergraduate, the certificate of higher education, right through level 5, which is your foundation degree. Level 5 is second year of degree. Level 6 is your final degree, honours degree, and level 7, the master's. It does actually go up to PhD as well, level 8. Okay, but we're not going to touch that. So, let me just give you a view. Here is the level descriptors, which forms part of something called the Quality Assurance Agency, QAA, Quality Code. And all HE organisations need to adhere to this code. Doesn't help the fact it's going through a change at the moment, but we're adhering to the current code. So it devises through a description of what we expect students at this level 4, which is first year of degree, what we would expect these students to be able to do or have the skills to do. So let me just give you an idea of the sorts of things that the description at this first year of degree would essentially says about a student that is at that level. So they would expect the student to have a basic, sorry, I'll put basis, it should be basic, fundamental concept knowledge, the key concepts, the basic concepts, and the basic skills. So for a computing student, that might be something to do with coding constructs, okay? If-then statements, whiles, etc. And skills, actually be able to do a basic, straightforward program using those constructs. They are able to make some decisions, although fairly straightforward ones, and they are able to do things in very straightforward but bounded situations. They have some ability to be able to present their work effectively and to take responsibility, but it's still quite constrained. So these are the sorts of things that are defined by the QAA as the sorts of things any student that's at level 4 should be able to do. Is that clear? Yeah. So I'm just going to skip one and look at level 6, because I always think level 4 and level 6 are the easiest, and the one in the middle is kind of between the two. It's slightly harder to define. I'm not quite sure why my things came up that way on this one. I must have given Armagon a slightly earlier version of my slides, because it should have had the level 6 one now. Okay, so we're now skipping to somebody who's at the end of their degree programme. And at that point, we would expect them to have a very detailed, very understanding of the process, so systematic, logical, and coherent body of knowledge by this point. Some of which is at the forefront of the subject. So right at the coal face, the end, the point of research. Now obviously if you went to master's level, that bit will become bigger. Almost all of it's at the level of that sort of research. And PhD is abundant, that is it. They can select and deploy effective strategies so they can make decisions on how to go about something. But the situations now are much more complex. They are unstructured. They are uncertain. There may be ambiguities, and they have to weave a path, an effective path through that. So they're dealing with much larger, messier problems and being able to deal with them effectively. They're also, they understand the limitations of their knowledge. They are able to exercise personal responsibility for undertaking not only the task, but also to undertake learning so that they can then achieve a task. And they can critically appraise, so this is informed appraisal of something, comparing and contrasting it using literature as evidence or other practical situations as evidence. So these are much more complex, deep learners at this point, deep thinkers. And this is our level 6, the end of our degree programs, our BScs, our BA honours, and indeed ordinary as well, because level 6 is covers both. So, okay, we now have something in the middle. Okay, so as you can imagine, when I try and describe this one, it's kind of saying it's more than level 4, not quite level 6. So they have a deeper knowledge than level 4, but not quite as systematic, comprehensive than as level 6. They are now beginning to be able to tackle not just straightforward problems anymore, but some that have got some degree of complexity, but not as much as when they get to level 6. They start to make decisions, sometimes in ambiguous situations, but not as much as level 6. So I see the sort of the level 5 as the one that I would define as in between level 4 and 6. It's much easier to do that. But obviously when we come to our program design and the modules that we design inside that, when we have a level 4 module, we obviously are looking towards the sort of things you would expect a level 4 student to be able to do. Likewise at level 5, and likewise at level 6. So the sorts of things we would expect to find in our design of our programs at level 6 are going to be far more complex, far more detailed, far more critical than what you would expect to find typically in level 4, which is very much more about can they do very straightforward tasks well, and can they essentially remember and use key fundamental knowledge. Everybody with me on that? Brilliant. And of course they build on one another. Yeah, it's a progression. So you've got at the top level 6, which goes on to level 7, and then which is masters, and level 8 is PhD. Okay, so that's the first one. I just also need to mention that the QAA also talk about subject benchmarks. These descriptions are for any graduate at those levels. There are also for each discipline, so there's one for computing, one for engineering, but there might be more than one for computing, and more than one for engineering, different types of engineering, where in that description there are statements that say what a curriculum should cover. What is the content that should be in the curriculum at level 4, level 5, level 6? Obviously they use these, they reflect these, it's all part of the same thing, but here we're talking about the subject knowledge that we would expect students to cover in their programs. And when we validate a new program here, we always ask the question, is it at the right level? And are the modules in it at the right level? And also, does it have the knowledge of the subject and the skills of the subject that would be expected as per the relevant subject benchmark, or benchmarks in some cases? Are we with me on that? Okay. Second thing I just want to draw to your attention is blooms. Hey, you've all come across blooms, I think. Yes? Okay. Bloom is a very widely respected, and now this is now quite 50 odd years ago, was coming up with his ideas. And he came up with a classification of what were called educational objectives, the sorts of things you would expect students to know at different levels of complexity, or be able to do, rather. Starting from the very simple, or simpler end, which is just to remember things. And then being able to actually explain it, for example, to show their understanding of those things. And then, not only to show understanding, but to be able to use it, to apply it. And then, not only be able to apply it, but also analyse it for its strengths and weaknesses. And then, be able to evaluate based on that strengths and weaknesses, coming to a conclusion about it, which may lead and then to creating something based on those evaluations. So this is a series of objectives about people's knowledge and the application of that knowledge that starts from the simplest form going through to the more complex form. Being able to create something is very complex. And there have been a few revisions to it. That's why it's called revised Bloom's taxonomy here. There was a big revision beginning of the millennium, I think 2001, which changed a few things. For example, to start with, Bloom's had this second to last, and that one last. And it's swapped it around, because really, on reflection, people thought creating things was a high order skill, high order thing, requiring high order thinking, much more than just evaluating. They also changed the names to be more verb-like. They were a bit sort of hard to understand words. They've changed them to verbs, because really it's about outcomes, what people can do. And that's why they're using verbs here. Can a person remember something? Can they recall it? And then a number of people, and Bloom themselves, have put a number of words that we use in English that reflect those skills at those different levels. No surprises then, and this is very useful, that at level 4, when you're asking for basic concepts and skills, that you might find more of these things being used, not always, but more of them. Whereas when you get up towards level 6 and 7 at